I think probably the biggest thing that I think where this needs to change is just that, women are 50% of the users. In the case of attractions, women tend to be the CEO of their households. They're the ones making most of these purchases. So I think it's important to involve them in understanding what these experiences look like for the buyers.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic.
All right.
Boom. Yes.
Good.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
I want you to think back to the last attraction you visited.
Okay.
And you bought a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know what software platform was being used on the back end of that ticket purchase?
Considering my involvement and proficiency in the industry, yeah, I probably did. However, most people would not necessarily think of that when they're buying a ticket, because they're buying a ticket from the attraction in which they're visiting, right? So therefore, It is their attraction's ticketing system, and it all is seamless and integrated. And they're buying it from the attraction or from the park. Therefore, it comes from them. So what about you?
The last place I went, I would say no, but I have noticed different places where a logo will pop up, like on a credit card machine or that kind of thing, where you can see the software that is behind the transaction, and also, like you said, because of the proficiency, understanding what those brands are. If I happen to see a certain logo, I'm like, oh, that's the software system behind this. The general public may not know what that is and probably don't care, right? And I think that's one of the things that I take away from our conversation today with Sondra Shannon, the CEO of Gatemaster Technology, where she talks about the fact that when they implement a software solution or a platform solution, she doesn't want people to know that it's them, right? She wants that to be seamless so that when they're buying a ticket, when they're interacting with that attraction, that's what they're thinking of as from a consumer standpoint. They're not thinking about the technology in between that is making that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And when that happens, then it's so seamless that it makes it easy for the operator and easy for the guest. And Sondra used the phrase making heroes out of operators, which I thought was so fascinating, because the technology needs to work, right? And when it doesn't work, it reflects poorly on the operator. And when it does work, it reflects highly on the operator. And it takes away perhaps a lot of the administrative work, a lot of the tasks that the staff need to go through to be able to accomplish necessary tasks. And it makes it easier for the guest as well, because if they can get into the venue much easier, then at that point, they're not thinking about buying tickets. I heard somebody say once that ticketing should be the only part of the experience of visiting an attraction that's forgettable. Because if you don't remember buying tickets, it probably meant it went pretty well.
I might have a little caveat to that, because thinking about a really, really great interaction that you might have with a person that, suggests a certain activity, or even a quote unquote upsell, right? That's a VIP experience or something that really enhances your experience. I might remember, Josh, that really enhanced my day. So I don't know. I may go back and forth on that one.
We don't do like point counterpoint that often. So I think it's, I think it's a nice thing to bring into the atmosphere every once in a while.
Yeah.
Obviously, you, the listener, the audience, you decide what you feel is best. But when you make heroes out of the operator and you operate from that mentality when you're providing a software, you're providing a product, I think it really influences the way that you develop the product and the way that you serve the client.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that Sondra talked about was the guest-driven transaction, which really is peppered throughout a lot of our conversation. When you think about who's the end user, what are they going through? You know, Sondra talks about not only herself as an enthusiast, but a parent and an operator. And so she's able to look at things and get her staff to look at things from so many different lenses that you can really create a product that will be hopefully invisible, right? And people won't know that that's who that they're interacting with the Gatemaster. They're just buying a ticket or whatever the interaction might be, that technology is actually invisible.
Yeah. And then we get to learn all about Gatemaster's company culture, which Sondra is so passionate about when she talks about it. And honestly, the feeling that I got was that, Gatemaster is a supplier, right? It's a software that is used by attractions, but her mindset almost makes it feel like she's implementing a culture for an attraction, right? The mindset that they have of creating memories and experiences for the guests who are visiting, that there's no wall between the operator and the supplier. It's all cohesive. It's all in one. I think it's just amazing the way that she describes the culture.
So on this one, I will wholeheartedly agree. So there's only a point here, no counterpoint. But I agree that, she's approaching it, and maybe this comes from her operator background. She's approaching it from not a tech position, but a hospitality position, right? And how do we make positive memories for the guests, but also through the operator, which goes back to making heroes out of the operator. So one of the words that I used in this interview was holistic. And I think that a lot of the things that you and I have even been talking about in just the last couple of minutes really demonstrate how there's so much thought that goes into so many different aspects of the business that ultimately that has to be what has made Gatemaster so successful over the years. But with all that said, maybe no more counterpoint or point counterpoint. Let's get to this interview with Sondra. What do you say?
Let's do it. Hey, Sondra, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Josh and Matt, for having me today.
Our pleasure. So to kick this off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and your career.
Sure. And I appreciate you guys asking that story because it's quite, I think I've had a pretty interesting journey in the attraction space. And, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about how once you're an attraction person, you're always an attraction person. So I actually started with Q-Zar, which was the first gamified experience in the attraction space. So I started with Q-Zar. And I was a general manager of a Q-Zar Laser Tag facility here in Southern California for a number of years in the late 90s. And what got me started at Gatemaster was at the time we were using Gatemaster's platform, so their original IP, which was Gatemaster Pro. And I for the sake of sounding like a nerd, I was a super user of this product. And when we sold our facility in 2002, the founder of Gatemaster recruited me to help him create the second iteration of Gatemaster, which was the E2 system that really got us into the broader attraction space, where we were able to springboard into water parks, the zoos, the museums, the theme parks. And from there, we're on a third and fourth iteration of the product. So we've come quite far from there, but that's my story in a nutshell. I started as an operator and was a user of the product and became the CEO of the company through years of, I've been with Gatemaster now for over 20, I think this is my 21st or 22nd year. I spent about 10 years on the road visiting attractions. I onboarded close to 800 attractions in my time that I was on the road, because back then we didn't have Zoom and the technology that we have today. But yeah, it was a neat experience for sure. And it's been a neat journey.
That's so cool. Actually, you know, the number of times that we've spoken, I did not know that you started off in Q-Zar. So learning things all the time. So I wonder if you can go back to that experience. And now you serve attractions, you were an operator. What kind of lessons do you take from the time that you were an operator that you still use now, you know, kind of relating back to that experience and saying, this is what operators need, because you do have that unique perspective?
You know, I think for me, when we're developing tech or we're developing systems or even processes that, you know, we're working hand in hand with operators, you know, we're really trying to be very light on the impact that we have on them from a process perspective. You know, for me, one of the things that I talk to my team about very often is that experience as an operator and how, you know, what we're doing should not impact the experience that the operators are having with their guests. It should not negatively impact. It should not create more workarounds for them. Their focus should be on the guest experience and not trying to figure out how to make something work with the system. You know, and oftentimes when we work with our partners in the attraction space, you know, we're replacing somewhere between 3 to 6 systems. And what I found from that is just the trying to think of the right word, the becomes so much more efficient for the operators. You know, how can we really take a lot of that burden off of them? And that's, I think, the biggest thing that I've brought into the company and the culture that we have here is, you know, how do we make heroes of the operators instead of, you know, if the customer's having a bad buying experience, you know, we don't ever want them to be perceived as a villain, right? And so how do we make the operator the hero of the stories that we're involved in?
Yeah, you know, it's so fascinating. It's such an important way to look at the business because from a software company, you're not always on site, right? So you're not
Yeah,
necessarily seeing that guest, maybe that mom who's got 2 kids
right.
who are crying and really anxious, and they're standing in line waiting to buy tickets or waiting to enter the venue. So how do you take that, I would say that operator experience and that guest experience and find ways to be able to not necessarily replicate that, but really live and breathe that when perhaps you're in an office, when you're in, you know, somewhere that's cool and has nice air conditioning and there aren't screaming kids and you're not in that environment physically, but being able to see it that way.
Well, there's a couple of ways that we do that today. One is, you know, we have our with Gatemaster, that our customers, we're really integrated into their business. So with our integrated services that comes with the product, we're managing a lot of the tools for the operations team. So we become an extension of their team. So we hear so much of what the operators' experiences are and where they would like to see that improvement. But I would also say, you know, like many of us in the attractions industry, you know, I'm an enthusiast of attractions. I mean, I think this weekend I'm going to the Renaissance Festival. It'll be like the 5th park I've been to, or the 5th experience that I've had this week, half of which I did with my family. So I'm also a mother of 3. You know, just to give you an idea of some of the ways that at least the creative vision that I've had over the years is, you know, we had a product in about 2012 that came out called Park Tabs. Well, if you remember when they first started putting chips on the cards, we were having several malfunctions with water. When when you start introducing water to chips in a water park, credit cards no longer worked. They were malfunctioning. And what actually gave me the idea is I spilled coffee in my purse and realized and my cards all stopped working, realized that was the problem. So what we did is we created Park Tabs, which allowed them to do a single swipe, create a tab, and then be able to access that tab from anywhere in the park. And they didn't no longer have to have their cards present or a chip present at the time. And so we were able to avoid that problem. And it's evolved into other products as the future goes. But I would also say, you know, as a mother of 3, I've stood in line for food with hangry children. And that's what led us to create our food mobile ordering system. Now, we were a little premature in creating that prior to the pandemic. We've had that for quite a few years. And it really took off during the pandemic when, you know, touchless and less interaction was needed during that time. So, you know, I've got one park, the city of Somerset, who is a huge advocate for our mobile ordering system, because now we took them from 30% online transactions to 80%, and that includes in-park sales. So it's quite a nice thing, but really a lot of these ideas came from not only my experience in working with operators, but also my personal experience of being a guest, and ways that I can see that we can improve these processes for guests.
That's so cool. And I love to hear how all those experiences create new products that ultimately are very practical for people.
Yeah.
Like when you talk about the credit card not working when it's wet, like it's almost like a duh, right? But
Yeah.
you don't think of that until you spill coffee in your purse potentially. So
Yeah.
I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about your experience or your journey as an enthusiast, and how that has also helped shape some of the other products that you've come up with, or maybe some things that you thought, hey, this would be a great idea, but then you got it on the drawing board and it just wasn't what you thought it was going to be.
Sure. I'm not afraid to say that for every one idea, there was probably 10 really bad ones. And sometimes we have parks that allow us to explore these ideas with them. And that's where I think, it's been a really unique position for us to be in, because we were founded by attraction people. And, our mission has always been to help them create memorable experiences through innovative technology and legendary service. And I think the legendary service part is also is a mirror and reflection of what we see in the parks. And so, one of the things that I'm constantly asking my team, every Friday we meet, what attractions are you going to this weekend? Because it's important to us that they are enthusiasts as well. Or, they may not all be enthusiasts, because, there's one type of attraction. I don't do well with jump scares. So haunted attractions, I send other people to those ones. But, really keeping our eye on, what is it like to be on that buyer's journey, and how can we improve that? And when we attend attractions, our team gets together and talks about what those experiences were like and how we can improve that. We're really secret shopping attractions all the time on our own. And what that allows us to do is really start keeping a lot of data on what we can do to help improve those experiences. Like I said, our main focus is on lifting the burden off of the operators, but also being a reflection of that service and hospitality that we see in so many of the attractions. We recognize that when a buyer when a guest spends money, many times they're significantly investing in those experiences. And we really try hard to make sure that we are a part of the experience and not something that would take away from that. And I think that's the biggest thing in being an enthusiast is when I look at my experiences, how can I improve that? Even at Disneyland, I'm looking around going, yeah, this is a great idea. We could fix this,
No, it's really interesting. And really you're recognizing that you have this responsibility to the client, that when when a guest comes through and they buy tickets and they have the experience, they don't care, what ticketing software the attraction is using, right? If it's a good experience, it reflects positively of the attraction. And if it's a bad experience, it also reflects it negatively on the attraction, because they don't know that it's another company that, that might be doing this. When you talk about kind of being an enthusiast, and we say, you encourage your team to say, what attractions you're going to go visit this weekend. And when you meet together, you talk about that. Can you elaborate a little bit maybe on what those conversations are like when you're meeting, and maybe you say, hey, this was a great experience. This is going really well. Or, I noticed some friction right here as I was going through this, and here's what we can do potentially to improve that. Can you shed some light maybe on what those conversations are like?
Sure. A lot of times, we're going in as guests, we're investing in that experience just to have a genuine understanding of what's happening in the attractions that we visit. We have a small team in Orlando, so they get to experience a lot of those parks. Here in Denver, at where I'm based, we try to visit as many attractions as possible. And I think really what we do is we just try to take notes on, how could we make that experience a little bit better? Because I think one of the biggest issues is that oftentimes operators don't know how to improve those experiences that the guest is having. They're fantastic at their craft, at what they do. Most of them are they don't need to improve the experience, but what they don't understand is the sales process and that buyer's journey. How can we improve that? So when we get together as a team, so we actually meet every Friday, and the last question we ask every Friday is, what attraction are you going to visit, or is anybody going to an attraction? And then on Monday, we all report back on where we went, where we saw that we could help them improve. And I really, more so than trying to acquire new partners, we're doing it to train our team and have them look at it from a different perspective. Because as you mentioned before, if you've not been behind a counter being yelled at and being yelled at, or have somebody who is unhappy with the experience, and you don't know, and you don't have the tools to handle that, it can be quite a difficult situation. And for me, I want to encourage more people to enter this space. So that's why part of my mission has been to improve that experience from a customer service perspective and an operator perspective, because I've been on that side where, the interactions are not necessarily as positive as I would have liked them to be. So, for us, one, I always try to go in whenever I was just at Pirates Cove, which is a city park in Colorado, and the line for food was over an hour, and we were waiting for a really long time. And I just made sure also that when I approached the person who was clearly just just hot and burned out for the day, who was behind the counter, and she happened to be the manager there, and just really had grace with her and made sure to tell her what a great job she was doing and encourage her and help her feel empowered in this position, even though she could not fix that line. I know that I could fix that line for her. Right. And that's actually what we see, like with the city of Somerset. We were able to reduce wait times by over 50% when they went to online ordering in their food and beverage. So it was an interesting, it's always an interesting experience, because my heart really goes out to a lot of the team members that are having to deal with these things, and there is ways to improve it, and they don't necessarily have that in their control, or they don't have the tools or the know-how to fix it.
Mm-hmm. Sondra, is what you're describing and have been talking about for quite a bit of our time together so far kind of around that guest-driven transaction, or is there something else behind that you guys focus on?
Well, I think ultimately all of these products we've created have led to what we now call the guest-driven transaction. And, a few years back, Harvard Business Journal did a study of over 200 companies, and they were talking about how self-service technology really empowers customers. I think it was 30 to 50% wait times were reduced when they studied these companies. They saw over an immediate 15% increase in customer satisfaction. I think today we would probably see an even greater percentage of what that looks like. And I think, all of these things that we talked about really have led us to the guest-driven transaction. There's a couple of things that happen here. Not only are we reducing wait times, customer satisfaction goes up, but we're also empowering the guest to take control over their purchases. It's transparent. I think today's buyers want to have transparency in their purchases. And when you have transparency with your guests, so they feel completely empowered to access everything that's being offered, they invest more in their experiences. So ultimately, everyone's winning in an experience like it when we create an experience like that on the buyer's journey. And I hope that answers your question, but I think all of these things have led to that guest-driven transaction. I think there's one other thing that I like to note with the guest-driven transactions is it also makes guests feel like you know them. When you're offering them upsells and alternative maybe experiences once they arrive, add-on experiences or meal vouchers or whatever that looks like, because it's very flexible. The tool with this tool, it's very flexible what can be offered. I think you are showing your guests that you know and care about them, and that you're trying to help them plan for the best possible experience when they arrive.
So playing devil's advocate a little bit on the guest-driven transaction, because I can only anticipate that there might be some questions that some people might have about this. So I'd love to have you address that. One of them is being that if it is self-service, then the sales process is not as personalized. And you said that they are spending more, but some people also argue that the face-to-face, the more consultative type of relationship and type of sale can lead to higher spending. And then the other side of it as well is, eliminating labor is a large cost savings. One might argue, being that we're in the human-to-human business, eliminating humans from the transaction or from that part of it, does that also make the experience less personal and less enjoyable for the guest? So I'd love to hear how you address those points.
Sure. There's a lot there to unpack, right? Because there's a lot going on when we talk about, the jobs, right? What we found is we're not necessarily replacing jobs, but we are currently facing a labor shortage. So we're able to alleviate maybe those monotonous tasks that they're doing that are not truly helping the guests. They're not serving the guests at that point. So let's say that when we implement something like the mobile ordering food and beverage and retail system, it's not that they no longer interact with the guests, because somebody still has to they still have to pick up or they have to do delivery, but the interactions are very different. So what we've actually seen from the data is that customers are spending more time with the menus. They're not feeling as rushed. I mean, when I'm waiting in line for an hour for food, half the time I forget what I'm gonna order, and then I'm so stressed out myself because these poor people are behind the counter. They're not giving me great service because they're scrambling. So what we found is we're taking the scramble out of it. You're not necessarily gonna replace staff. It's just now they actually are more focused on the guest experience and the hospitality. And so what we're trying to do is empower hospitality. I think that answers part of your question. I think some of the other things with the guest-driven transactions is, it's very difficult to offer that complete experience if you don't have a technology that is seamlessly integrated across the park. And I think that's without that, you would have a broken experience, and it might actually become more burdensome than helpful. So that's one of the things that Gatemasters really tried to do, is all of our products work seamlessly together. Park doesn't really have to worry about how do we bridge these gaps. Our e-commerce, our point of sales, the mobile ordering, they're all speaking to the same database. And we've thought about that really, in the early 2000s, we thought about that from its inception, that we needed to be able to do this natively. And I think that's just an important thing to know, that it's very difficult to do for a lot of attractions because they don't have the tools to do it. So I think this is where the future is moving. I think there's still some time to where we get to where the customers are fully autonomous on their own, right?
Yeah.
But
well, I really appreciate what you said. And I think you even said it earlier about how, sometimes when you're coming into a facility, you may be replacing 3 or 4 different systems, maybe that didn't talk to each other. And I know I've dealt with that in previous roles, that it wasn't so fun, right? To get the different databases to try to talk to each other. So I think part of what I'm wondering is, with technology changing and advancing so fast, and not only your technology, but the technology that we have in our hands, right? If so, there's something that's, mobile ordering, well, now you've got to make sure that it works on all different kind of phones and that type of thing. So I'm curious how you stay ahead of that, or how you keep up with that when your business is technology, right? And now you've got to keep up with all the other technologies as well.
Yeah, we're definitely nerds over here, right? So, I think it was Jeff Bezos that said, you need to lean into the future. And I think that's something that we've really taken to heart, is leaning into the future, being willing to see where the industry goes, listening to our partners on the challenges that they're having and how we can improve that. When we look for new talent, we're looking for people who could provide different understandings of how things work. And that might include different tech. Last night I was a guest over at Disneyland, and we were writing The Rise of the Resistance. They said there's over 400 million lines of code. Well, Gatemaster rivals that, right? After all these years, I mean, we've been around for almost 30 years. Gatemaster's technology rivals that. And that's not easy to do, because we're having to actually move between the attraction space. And then I spend a lot of time at tech conferences outside of this space to really try to understand, what are our options in terms of future technology? Who are the people that can help us get there? And I've spoken on a number of tech panels and been invited to speak for outside of the space. One in particular group that I've spoken at their conferences in Boston, San Francisco, Denver, and is Women Impact Tech. And, for me, it's just important, because when you look at C-level executives in technology, and we're talking outside of the attraction space, we represent maybe about 5%. And so I really do feel that in order to stay relevant and to keep moving toward the future, I have not only this responsibility as one of those 5% of people in technology to lean into the future, but really use it as my headwind. That makes sense. It's not a tailwind for me. It's a headwind. So a lot of my team is always trying to stay up to date on what's happening, especially, with what we see happening with AI and, artificial intelligence. We actually, we have our, with the guest-driven transactions, we know that part of where we're going and who we're choosing to work with is bringing a lot of that automation and artificial intelligence, machine learning into what we do.
Would love to talk more about your involvement with women in tech and empowering women and increasing that 5% to be much greater. Can you talk more about your efforts and your initiatives towards doing that?
Sure. So, just getting involved in an organization like this has been incredibly rewarding. And to be honest, I just for a lot of years, just had my head down doing the work that we do, trying to stay up to speed with what's happening with regards to technology and this industry that we work in, attractions. And somehow, a few years back, they reached out to me and they said, we're really, not only is this a really cool industry that a lot of people don't consider the needs of, when I tell people what I do, I'm sure you guys have experienced too, they're like, you work with attractions? Like, how lucky are you? I get to go to Disneyland and all of these fun places for work. I really have the best job. But when we look at the technology industry, and really, I think that the biggest challenge is this, that we need to encourage more women to enter the STEM industry. I think that we're seeing improvement because now, girls are oftentimes taught to do more hospitality jobs. So I think we see a lot of equality in the hospitality space. But, oftentimes aren't encouraged to enter into the math, the sciences, technologies. And so really my work there is just to kind of be a lighthouse for women who want to be a part of this industry. And it certainly is a challenge. When I started with Gatemaster 20 years ago, and I was, I think, like employee number 30, I was the youngest and the only woman in the company. So you can imagine back then, and I didn't know other women in technology at that time. So really, it's just been nice to be somebody who's pioneered that space, but also helping women find mentorship and resources that they need to be able to enter these spaces. And I think probably the biggest thing that I think where this needs to change is just that, women are 50% of the users. In the case of attractions, women tend to be the CEO of their households. They're the ones making most of these purchases. So I think it's important to involve them in understanding what these experiences look like for the buyers. journey.
You know, what I appreciate about so many of the things you've talked about so far is there's sort of this holistic view of sort of bringing everybody together, right? Bringing the operators, bringing the tech people together, bringing the consumer together, you know, focusing on all different people that might be making these buying decisions. And I really do appreciate that a lot. And I'm also curious because I would love to work at a company, and I do think, you know, we all have the best jobs in the world, that, you know, when somebody says on a Friday meeting, what attractions are you going to this weekend? I mean, that's awesome, right? And I get to ask myself that question too. But I'm a solopreneur, if you will. So you've got a team, you've got this company that you're running, and I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about your company culture, because
Sure.
like you said, I mean, you've got tech people, you've got nerd people, probably some people are attractions people, but I'm curious how you bring all those together to form your company culture.
Well, I think one, our mission's very clear, right? People are. It's easy to buy in on this idea that we can help people create memories. If I can, last night this project that I'm working on, took us to Disneyland to look at some of the improvements that they've made to accessibility for everyone, and what that technology looks like, and that's kind of a project that I'm working on. And what brings me to this, though, is as we entered the park, I asked the team that I was with, can we stop by the tiki room? Can that be the first thing we do? And the reason that comes up for me is because my grandfather, who helped raise me, passed away when I was 10. Every year he would take me to Disneyland, and that would be the first place he would go. In fact, he named two of my aunts after the birds that are in there. Suzette, I got an aunt Suzette, Gigi, which are the names of the birds. And, when we, just to kind of bring this full circle, I want my team and the people that I work with to have, these are things that are imprinted with us. These experiences that we're creating in this industry, people are imprinting with that. That's my imprint. I was so grateful that this team allowed me. I was with a $6 billion man last night, and I'm like, hey, will you go to the tiki room with me first? And thank them for allowing me to do that, because it was important for me. But that was my imprint, right? And I think for my team and the people that I work with, I want to know what that looks like for them, because if you don't understand that, how can we improve that? How can we assist the operators with creating that experience? I think many of us are here today working in this industry because we appreciate what's happening, the connections that are being made for families and friends, and people are getting together and going to attractions, the thrills that we have. I just saw a video of my daughter's first ride on a roller coaster, which was at Legoland in Carlsbad. And I took a little video of her after, and it was her first ride. And she said, well, my eyes were closed in the picture, because it just, just those memories that we're creating together. But I would say what really brings us all together, I mean, at Gatemaster, we are very much guided by our core values of being aligned and disciplined and results oriented, accountable, inspirational, and transparent. And a reason that we landed on a lot of these were because we understood that was what was going to be needed from us when working with the attractions that we work with, that we serve. I mean, ultimately, those were the things that would be needed from us. And I think inspirational is one of my favorites, because it's things like this, people like you guys who are inspiring this industry to continue to do the work that we do.
Well, thank you. Sondra, what guidance would you offer to those who are listening to this, whether they are the CEO or a director, manager, supervisor, leader, to everything that you just said in the last 4 or 5 minutes or so, to take that and implement that within their team, and that type of that culture, that feeling that's able to run through everyone's veins?
I think one of my favorite values there is alignment. And it might sound cliche, but most of my team is really, our success is that we're aligned, and my executive assistant, her daughter's named after a Disney princess. When I heard that, I'm like, you're hired, right? Because it's important to me. I know she loves she's a Disney enthusiast, I think she would call herself. But I think alignment is super important. And if you don't understand why we do this work, and I think your audience, I'm probably preaching to the choir, because we're all here because we understand how important it is to put smiles on people's faces. And I think alignment is probably the biggest advice that I would give someone, and is try to figure that out. When I say that we're guided by that, we hire, fire, and reward not only our team, but our customers. I mean, because, I want to be a part of all of the big and great things that are happening. And if you are not, inspirational, for instance, in the work that you're doing, that's just not really helping the industry. So, really just trying to be guided by these principles and have that alignment. I think making sure that everybody's on board for the mission is important, and that you can create that vision of where you're going. For me, I think that's probably my biggest job at the company, is to always keep reminding the team of where we're going and the vision of what we're trying to create. So vision being a really big thing. If you're in a position like mine, where you've got to keep everybody aligned, I think vision is a very important part of that.
I would agree with that. And I share your adherence to alignment. I've worked with a lot of people who are in positions with they're really not aligned for, but they don't recognize it, right? So sometimes it takes a third party to be able to point those things out. But I'm curious also, thinking back on your career, if you were to talk to yourself 30 years ago, what kind of advice would you give yourself in terms of being as successful as you've become?
I think the only advice that I would give myself, because for a lot of years I was focused on product development, and which wasn't a bad thing. I think that was necessary in order for us to really understand what would be needed in the future, right? But continuing with professional development, and actually, I think that is something that is probably very difficult for most people. I know it was for me, to take time out to understand not only the work that we do, because there's also the business building part of what we do, right? It's a separate task. It's a separate job. It's almost a separate business. So, learning, I took more of a entrepreneurial path to leadership. So there was a lot of hard learning along the way. A lot of mistakes were made, and, maybe I could have avoided those, but also I like to embrace them at this point. I quit school to play laser tag. My family was so disappointed in me, but I don't think that they ever saw that would lead me to being a CEO of a tech company in this space. I don't know that I saw that back then, but I think professional development was the key. I just think I could have done more of it, and maybe taken that more serious sooner and earlier in my career. But I can't be too hard on myself, because I was really focused on the work that I was doing.
Do you have any favorite mistakes or failures that have turned into some of the best lessons for you?
Man, there's a lot that's happened over the last few years, and probably a lot of mistakes. I would say that, when I look at mistakes, and this is something I tell my team, one of the things that I think has not only made me successful, but also made us successful with the attractions that we serve is, owning a lot of the challenges and mistakes that happen. Mistakes are going to happen, right? A lot of times when we're setting up strategies for the parks that we're working with, it's not a science. There's so many different things. I mean, there's no exact science. There's so many different things, from who their demographics are and what we're doing, and mistakes can be made. But ultimately, because results oriented is always been one of the guiding principles of this company, we're able to really look at what would measure the success of what we're doing. And I think my biggest mistake, and I don't know if I'm allowed to get into it, it might be a little bit controversial. I had a customer that became a competitor of mine, and I'd shared everything with them, all of my best stuff. And for a long time, that was very difficult for me. I felt that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I had made. But at the same time, I realized that, they can't steal my mind. And at the end of the day, I needed to just continue on, push forward, and try to keep doing what we do and do it to the best of my ability. And while that was one of my biggest mistakes, it proved that we could be super, at least for me, it proved to me that I could be super resilient in this space, but also, pick myself up and figure out how to continue to innovate and create and collaborate and really just try to beat them on better service and better products and better innovation, happier customers. And I'm happy to say, I don't even know if they're still around anymore, so it's not even that big of a story to tell, but it was one of the biggest mistakes of my career. It was a very difficult challenge to deal with.
That story actually reminds me of when I took a tour of the Zappos, not a factory, but the Zappos offices out in Las Vegas. And they literally gave you the playbook of what they do because their culture was so famous and that kind of thing. And somebody asked them, they said, well, aren't you worried that somebody's going to, steal this? And they're like, steal it, take it. They said, we know that only, a fraction of the people are actually going to do something with this, right? And maybe they help their business. They're certainly not going to create another Zappos, but they were willingly sharing that. And I think that goes to your story of resiliency. And, you've got your mind, like you said, and you've got your team and your abilities, and believing in yourself, I think, has been probably, one of the most important things for you versus worrying if somebody else had the same technology or the same information, right? I mean, that's what I kind of took from that.
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly on. I should have said, give them your best stuff always, right? Like that's actually what I say to people all the time. Just give them our best stuff, whether they're paying me or not, right? Whether they're a customer or not, I truly believe that we are here to serve each other, and there's so much space for that if we allow for it. So, that was probably the biggest thing for me, is I realized that I can continue to give my best always to everyone. And this is not something I'm going to worry about.
Yeah. So Sondra, we only have a few minutes left here, but one question that we do want to know is, when looking at ticketing technology and the software and all of that, what's next?
We touched on it a little bit. I really do believe that we're heading into an era of really self-driven transactions, the guest-driven transaction, self-service technology. And I think that is a big part of our focus, is how do we help the attractions that we're working with move in this direction so that they can improve the satisfaction of their guests. So to me, I think that's where we're going. And I know that's controversial to say, but I think if we look at it as a partner in hospitality rather than taking away from the experiences, because I truly believe that, if we can get rid of just those busy work tasks that a lot of us are doing, we can really focus on the hospitality side of the business.
Mm. And that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? When you think about, way back to what you said in the beginning of this interview, when you talked about the fact that you don't want your technology to get in the way of the guest experience, certainly to enhance it or to, to make it easier and less frictionful, if that's a word. But, to focus on that, that really increases the hospitality that other people can provide, I think is a great message and really great way to kind of sum up a lot of the things that we've been talking about here. But Sondra, this has been a great conversation, and we really appreciate your time. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Gatemaster, where would you send them?
Head over to our website, gatemaster.com. And, I'm on LinkedIn. In fact, my friends always make fun of me because I tell them, I don't do the other social media, but I'm on LinkedIn. And so I definitely am on LinkedIn. I'm Sondra Shannon on LinkedIn. I would love for anyone in your audience to connect with me. And I often say in my LinkedIn lives, if I don't have answers for you, I'm happy to connect you with people who do. And like we said earlier, giving people my best stuff always is what I hope to offer to the world and to this industry. So please connect with me there. And then Sondra at gatemaster.com if you want to email me.
Excellent. I really enjoy following you on LinkedIn, and everything that you post is always very either informational or inspirational. So that's definitely go connect with Sondra on LinkedIn for everyone out there. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the conversation. And for everyone out there who is watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit attractionpros.com.